There you are. I knew you were here. Now you can't hide. Hey, all of us have priorities, or at least we should, right? And we all believe that we know the order of our priorities, at least in theory, but I think this is true. You can't really know the order of your priorities until one of your priorities gets to compete against another of your priorities. So if you have two things you absolutely love to do, you get asked to do both of those things on the same night, at the same time, in two different places. All of a sudden, you have to decide which one of these you choose. Any husbands out there tend to choose the wrong priority when that just husband confession time? I mean, you can only choose to be in one place at one time. So if the same thing's happening at the same time in a different place, you've got to choose a priority there. Same thing happens when it comes to a job offer. Let's say that there are two companies that you've said you would give anything to work at those two companies. And the same day you get a job offer from both of those companies. You tweet about it, so we're all feeling inferior. But then you have to make a decision about which one of those companies you want to work for the most. And our favorite priority competition here at Epic is you might want to rock a pair of skinny jeans and eat unlimited ice cream, but you have to choose. A few months ago, someone told me this. They said, Ben, you do know that you could buy a pair of skinny jeans 4 sizes too big and eat all the ice cream you wanted to. So that's what I'm working on now. No, there's your priority hack for this week, brought to you by your church community. We all have assumptions when it comes to priorities about our own priorities, and we're probably pretty well in the know about what our priorities are. But let me say this, we also all have assumptions about what God's priorities are. And so we're in week 6 of the Jesus Reimagined series, and what we're doing, if you're just catching up to speed, what we're doing throughout this series is reimagining Jesus so that we might reimagine how to relate to him, that we might reimagine what he's all about, what he wants from us, those kinds of things. And today, I want to invite you to see this moment where everyone who was with Jesus saw him put his priorities on display. And so if you're checking your email right now, whatever, and you're like, Ben, usually this is pretty boring, it's going to be really interesting today. If you're interested at all in what Jesus' priorities might have been and what they might be today, especially as it relates to a group of us like this, then I want you to lean in and listen, where Jesus is going to show us what it was that mattered most to him. And in this moment that you're about to walk into, what happens in this moment causes everyone present that day to pull one of these. Everyone. Whatever side people were on, the religious people, the common people, when Jesus drops the mic, everyone just like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Because what they saw and what they heard made them reimagine everything they assumed about what God's priorities might be. And I don't know where you're at today, but I want you from the very onset of this talk to have one question in your mind. What do I believe are God's priorities? What do I believe God prioritizes? And if you have a Bible, we're in Luke chapter 13. This entire series comes out of the Gospel of Luke primarily. Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. And as you turn there, would you stand? Or you can just look at it on the screen today. But just we're thinking about this question, what does God prioritize? Like at the end of the day, what matters most to God? And my guess is if we took a survey this morning, we would have perhaps more answers than there are people in this room about what God prioritizes. And let me say this from the very beginning. All of us have been in a variety of religious settings where we've been told exactly what God prioritizes. And today I want us to lean in and say, and just to see where we led astray in that. Did we lead ourselves astray in what we thought God prioritized? And does Jesus want to set some things straight in my mind and heart and in yours? So here's Luke 13, 10 through 17. It says, on a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord answered him, "You hypocrites! Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. You may be seated. Don't just skim the surface on this text. I realize that I've had a lot more time to think about this going into today. That's part of my job, and I'm glad for that. But I want to make sure that you get under the surface of what's happening in this text. And so I want to point some things out to you that you might just miss. But this is an incredible moment. Remember, they are gathered on the Sabbath. It's a religious setting. Might be like what you think about you're doing today to some degree. And there's all kind of things that unfold in this poignant moment that changed how everyone in the room thought about God and Jesus moving forward. So maybe today, that moment would occur in your own life where you walk in thinking one thing about church, about Jesus, about religion, about what we care about here at Epic, and you walk out experiencing something very, very different than what you thought you might experience. So everyone who's present in this moment comes face to face with having to reimagine who Jesus is and what he cares about, what he came to do, what his priorities were. It's the Sabbath day. This is the one day per week that is set aside for God. The Sabbath is a gift from God. It's intended to be filled with rest, worship, delight, remembering, restoration, trust. And so Jesus is in a religious setting. He's teaching at the synagogue. I'm guessing for the last time at this particular synagogue. Anybody else? Like, I'm assuming the invitation. You know, when you speak somewhere, you want to know how you did, and if we judge it based on whether you get a future invite, I think Jesus is one and done right here at the synagogue. But he's teaching in a religious environment, and he's teaching on the most religious day of the week. And so what's he going to prioritize? Because in this moment, what happens is there are some priorities in the room that come head to head. I'm not saying that Jesus was unsure about his own priorities, but people in the room were unsure what mattered most. And to be honest, they had been led to believe that following rules enforced oftentimes by men who claimed to be God's leaders, they were living under that pressure. They were living at times under that oppression of their religious leaders. So what's Jesus going to prioritize? Is he going to prioritize rules or people? Would he choose their law or would he extend his grace? What's he going to prioritize? Ultimately, religion or freedom? That's the name of the talk today, religion or freedom. Jesus was a master teacher. I would say arguably the greatest communicator to have ever lived was Jesus. At least I'm not going to make an argument for anyone else. Jesus being a master teacher meant that he loved teaching. He prioritized teaching. He was a brilliant communicator. And when he would get up to teach, he had something to say. But there's something that happens in this moment that causes Jesus to interrupt his own teaching. Like if you know anything about teaching, you know that the teacher wants to communicate what he has prepared to communicate. We do know that, right? And only an emergency would cause someone who's wanting to communicate information, only an emergency would cause them to interrupt the middle of their teaching and take care of something. Oftentimes, now that I've been teaching for a number of years, and this is kind of that 10,000 hour thing for me, when I first started teaching, I could only stay focused on what I was supposed to say. And if you think that I speak fast now, you should have heard me then. And I was so fixated. But over the years, what's happened is the game has slowed down in my mind, if that makes sense. So while I'm teaching you something right now, I'm thinking about I should have lunch with that guy. And I wonder how her job is going. And I wonder if the baby's come. I guess not. She's at church and was due yesterday. I'm thinking about all of these things, right? And oftentimes while I'm teaching, I will see one of you and I will think to myself, I need to make sure that I say something to you before you leave. Maybe it's been a while since you've been here and I want to catch you out the door. Maybe I heard something this week that's happening in your life and I want to say, I want you to know I'm praying for you. If there's a way we can help serve you, let me know. Others of you, I'm thinking, I need to tell them before they leave, they chose the wrong outfit for today. And everybody's self-conscious all of a sudden. I'm like, no, you're fine. You're fine. Really? Did you wear that to church? No. So I'm thinking about those things, but to be honest, I'm not going to stop teaching to come and tell you those things. Now, we could have the kind of urgent emergency take place in this teaching that would cause me to stop my teaching. I had a couple of these moments before. I was teaching at a camp in Brooklyn, New York one time, and I was teaching just like this. And a man who wasn't part of our camp had come in to Long Island University at the Brooklyn campus. He had come into the auditorium, and while I'm teaching about the resurrection of Jesus, this man stands up. There's about 300 teenagers and their adult sponsors. This man stands up, and he says to me, Jesus did not die for sins, and there's no such thing as the resurrection. Now, at that moment, I can't just go on, right? Like, it's me, a bunch of 6th through 12th graders, and this guy. Like, what are you going to do in that moment? There are moments where it's worth stopping your teaching and interrupting yourself. But the things I just shared with you, I wouldn't interrupt my teaching. Jesus is prioritizing his teaching all throughout his earthly ministry, but something stopped him dead in his tracks. And I don't want you to miss this. It's in verse 12. It's in verse 12. Do not miss this. He's teaching, he's scanning the crowd, and something arrests his attention. What is it? These words. When Jesus saw her. When Jesus saw her. Something grabbed his attention so profoundly, something that he prioritized more than the information he was communicating, stopped him dead in his tracks. And I want you to know today, I'm going to teach for another 20 minutes, okay? So hang in there. But you might simply be brought here today by God to hear this one thing. Jesus sees you, and he sees you, and he sees you, and he sees you. I don't know what you think about the masses in terms of religion, and there's a God who's distant, but he sees you. And that day in the synagogue, he's in the crowd, he's teaching, and someone, an individual, grabs his attention. Jesus sees you. He sees you right now in this crowd this morning. You're like, Ben, I'm trying to remain anonymous. I might not know who you are. He does. He sees you. He knows you. I know that you live in the nation's second most densely populated city. Nearly 1 million people, 49 square miles. I know you might feel like there's no way anyone knows me in this place. Jesus sees you. I know this morning that you're walking a planet with 7.5 billion other people, and you need to know today, Jesus sees you. If you want to know a verse that just resonates with this idea, I believe it's Genesis 16:13. Hagar, who had been Abraham's servant, she had God reveal himself to her as he is the God who sees. The God who, be glad you're at 10:30. They didn't get the Brooklyn story. They didn't get the Genesis 16:13. It means you're not going home on time. But anyway, you're getting so much more added content. I promise I prepared yesterday for this message. But the God who sees. Like, whatever you believe before you came in here, whatever you've been told about being a nobody, whatever you've been overlooked for in your company, overlooked by your family, overlooked even by the people who should care most about you, you are not overlooked today. I thought there'd be like some applause. Like, I thought somebody would be excited about the reality that you've not been overlooked. Maybe you didn't get the job. Maybe you are still single, but you have not been overlooked by the God who created you and is interested in you, so much so that Jesus stops mid-teaching to say, I need to talk to her. And he asks her to come forward. So you're like, Ben, do not do that. I mean, I'm good with the fact that God sees me, but I don't want everyone else to see me. She comes forward. It is a pointed moment, right? And Jesus, filled with compassion, he says to her, you are set free from your infirmity. But she's bent over from what we can tell. So he speaks this freedom into her, but then he touches her, and the text says for the first time in 18 years, she stands up. And what does she do when she stands up? She begins to praise God. Do you know why? Of course, Ben, God healed her. She begins to praise God because everyone in that synagogue knew that healing like this could only come from God. But Jesus isn't simply there to illustrate God's power. See, Jesus didn't merely come to reveal God's power. He also came to show us God's priority. He came not just to reveal God's power, he came to reveal God's priorities. You see, if you even have a vague idea in this room that there is a God, I'm guessing you probably think that God is a little bit powerful, just by very definition. But what you might not think is that he wants to steward his power for your freedom. Don't miss this. You see, if God is powerful but doesn't want to help me and doesn't want to help you, that really doesn't benefit me at all, does it? It just makes me scared of God. But if God is powerful and he wants to use his power to break my chains and to heal me and to set me free, guess what? All of a sudden, now I see something on display that I can rally around with my entire life. Jesus did not merely come to reveal God's power. He also came to reveal God's priorities. But not everybody's happy about this, are they? In verse 14, it says the leader of the synagogue was indignant. Anybody see anyone indignant this week? Anybody? You don't need to point to him. I assume it's your boss who's not at church this morning, or someone on the streets, or anyone else like on the roads this week. Is anyone that you made furious? You guys know how this works, right? Whenever you're on a bicycle, you think people walking and driving are the worst, right? Whenever you're in your car, you think these pedestrians. When you're the pedestrian, you're like, what is up with all these bikers and drivers? Right? This religious leader, he is fit to be tied. He is furious. And I want you to see what he says. Anybody have someone in your life, and this is an all place, so tell me, do you have anyone in your life when they're mad at you, they tell everybody else about it? Anybody? Like, if you want to tell me something, just tell me. This synagogue leader, he doesn't speak to Jesus. He speaks to the people. So just, again, it might not have been exactly like this, but picture this. Jesus at the front teaching, the woman's now at the front, and the religious leader, the synagogue leader, he stands up to speak to all the people. Just picture that. And he says, you can come the other 6 days and have your healing. Don't come on this day. There's no work to be done on this day. Now, aren't you glad that no one, including a religious leader of any stripe, can stop Jesus from doing what Jesus wants to do in your life? Hear me. I don't care if a pastor told you what you could not have Jesus do in your life. I don't care what your mom told you. I don't care what your small group leader, certainly at some other church, not here, told you. I don't care what they told you. Jesus will do whatever he wants to do in your life, and he does not need a mediator to get permission. He'll just show up and he'll work. And he'll show up and work today. It doesn't matter who's counted you out. It doesn't matter what your habits are. It doesn't matter what you're bound to. If there's anything we're learning in this text, is that Jesus has come to free us. Now, this synagogue leader, I know there are humans like this, right? We see them kind of all over the place. But imagine this. This woman has been crippled for 18 years. She stood up straight for the first time in almost 2 decades, and all he wants to do is tell people, don't come do this again. Like, who wants this guy in their family? On their team? Who has this guy on their team? Who wants this guy in their small group here at Epic? No, none of us do. But it does beg the question, why would Jesus heal her on the Sabbath? Why would he? You need to use your imagination here. I mean, if I can be honest, she's been crippled for 18 years. What's one more day? Imagine this scenario. Jesus finishes his teaching. He doesn't interrupt himself. He's told himself, like I told you that I do sometimes, I've got to find that lady before I leave. Right? So teaching's over. Everyone's exiting the temple. He finds this woman. He bends down because he would have to bend down to talk to her. He bends down and he tells the woman this. hey, I know that you've lived with this for 18 years. If you will meet me here tomorrow at sunrise, I will heal you. What would her reaction been? Yeah, please. She wouldn't have slept that night. She wouldn't have left the temple disappointed. She would have left the temple excited. Why? Why would she have left the synagogue excited? Because he's told me tomorrow all of my pain and suffering, it's going to end. I'm on board with that. Why in the world would Jesus do it on the Sabbath? I mean, it's these kind of moments and these kind of people that are going to lead to his crucifixion. He could at least put off the cross a little bit by not doing what he's doing. Jesus, why not the next day? Here's why. Jesus wanted to make a statement for the religious leaders and for those who had been living under the weight of their religion to know what matters most to him. And today, I believe all throughout this room, Jesus wants you to know what it is that matters most to him. The man did not speak directly to Jesus, but Jesus spoke directly to the man. And when you read verses 15 and 16, if you read it in a monotone voice, you might just miss Jesus' point. If you're like, Jesus said, you hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? No. More like this. You hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox and your donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? You guys do know Jesus didn't speak in a monotone voice, right? Like, Ben, I know he was all human and all divine. Like, do you think he had some of these emotions? Yeah, just keep reading. Now, don't miss the imagery Jesus is using. He says this. You guys are willing to free your ox or your donkey from the stall to give your ox or your donkey water. And you don't want me to free this woman who's been tied up by Satan for 18 long years? We all know that 18 years is a long time, right? Jesus, that word, the Greek word, it's in there. He's not just saying it's 18 years. We all know that's a long time. He's saying these have been for her. You know how some seasons, the days and years are longer than others? She's been in a season, 18 long years. And Jesus is saying, wait, you can untie your ox and donkey to give them water on the Sabbath? That's awesome, but you want to hold it against me for freeing this woman who's been bound by Satan 18 years. If you don't know what Jesus cares about, keep reading this text this week until it hits you. He's not interested in religion. He's not interested in you checking a box. He's not interested in you going through the motions to earn our God's approval. He's stepping onto the scene to bring you freedom. That's what he's doing. Jesus did not come to uphold a religion. Jesus came to free a people. I got to repeat that because I'm just getting some facials where I'm like, Ben, I don't know. That doesn't seem to move me. Jesus did not come to uphold a religion. He came to free a people. He came to free you. And the more you and I go, I don't know if there's sometimes where religion just seems like the easier move than Jesus does, right? How many besides the pastor, you're a little bit driven, and if someone tells you you can follow these 12 or 12,000 steps and win the game, you're willing to go for it? Anybody? Just tell me what to do. Now, if it's dunking a basketball, let's put it on an 8-foot goal, but I will do whatever I need to do to get in. I'm willing to do it, I promise. I promise. I will read every book on that subject if that's how I get in. I will find mentors who have gotten in to tell me how to get in. I will hire a coach to teach me, because if that's all I have to do, in some ways religion makes it easier, but if you choose religion, you miss out on Jesus. You miss out on Jesus. You see, with religion, you can give your money to the church and think you're fine with God. With religion, you can attend 2 or 3 Sundays a month and think you're fine with God. With religion, go on a humanitarian trip and think that you're fine with God. But Jesus, you've got to have personal contact. And one of the amazing things we've seen at Epic over and over and over again is people who had no church background but assumptions about religion, or people that were very churched in some kind of religion, even oftentimes, to be honest, a religion that comes underneath Christianity, at least in label, and they've met Jesus here and have told me, these are really smart men and women in our church, and they said to me, Ben, I had no clue I could know Jesus personally. And I did church a long time. And some of you are in that boat. And while it's appealing, while it's compelling, in some ways, it's easier to stay at a distance with God, isn't it? But I want you to know, however vulnerable it has to make you to have personal contact with Jesus, that is what you're destined for. And until you have that personal contact with him, freedom will not come. It won't. And you can keep reading the self-help books, you can keep showing up at church until you have personal experience with Jesus Christ, you will miss out. These two groups of people had very different responses. Verse 17, when Jesus said this, it said all his opponents were humiliated. They were humiliated. They could not believe that someone claiming to represent God would not uphold their religion over people. They couldn't believe that. But that wasn't the only response, right? I mean, think about it. The religious people were humiliated in their synagogue. Here's why. You can be incredibly religious and completely miss out on Jesus. Hear this again. Some of you are like, Ben, I'm in a good place because I'm incredibly irreligious. Well, that's a different sermon. I don't know that that's the better option. But you can be incredibly religious and completely miss Jesus. And you're the exact person that we started this church for. You're the exact reason I spent hours making sure I knew what I was going to say clearly today. You're the reason that our team gets together and prays. You're the reason why we have these baptism moments, because some of you, we know this, right? You did the religious thing, or your parents did. You were baptized as an infant. But we say, hey, we want you to own your faith. It's a personal faith. It's not something someone chooses for you. That's why on April 1st, we're going to rally around New Life right in this corner, because people are going to be declaring the freedom they found in Jesus that they could not find in religion. But you've got to step into it. You and I have to step into what Jesus has come to offer us. It's these Sabbath kind of moments that are going to lead to the death of Jesus. In fact, Mark chapter 2, as it ends and as chapter 3 begins, there are two back-to-back Sabbath moments that Mark records where the religious leaders had a problem with how Jesus acted on the Sabbath. And the last verse of those two encounters is Mark chapter 3, verse 6, and here's what it says. After all the Sabbath stuff Jesus did the healing on, it says, then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. If you want to know what religion looks like that's ugly, that's anti-God and his ways, the religious leaders, because Jesus is doing God's work on the Sabbath, they want him dead, and they're going to get their wish. Now, before I tell you how religion and freedom intersect at the cross most powerfully, I want you to know that when you and I think about the cross of Jesus, it doesn't take God by surprise that this is the means by which Jesus would have to die. It was God's idea, it was God's intention, and we can do a long seminar about how that all works together. But from human perspective, I'm going to tell you this. Religion put Jesus on the cross. Hear me. Religion, not the bad guys who were seen as criminals in the society. The religious leaders put Jesus on the cross. So religion put Jesus on the cross, and yet Jesus uses the cross to bring about our ultimate freedom from sin. And the cross, not only does it tell you what God's about, it also tells you what his priorities are. On the cross, the sinless Savior offers his life for your sins so that you and I could experience freedom, that we might have life. 1 John 5:12 says it like this, in case you want to know where you stand today. 1 John 5:12, it says, he who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. I know it's easy to step into a crowd like this. I know it's easy not to have to lean into any of the questions that I might be asking, because again, I'm not asking everybody to answer them out loud. But I want to ask you very personally, Do you know him? Have you been set free by him? Not interested in your religious background. Not for this conversation, at least. As people have experienced Jesus here at Epic, a common thing that we hear from them is, hey, for me to move forward like this, I literally feel like I'm disowning my family. And for some extreme cases at Epic, we've had baptisms we could not publish online because this person was from a different faith that would be totally, leaders in her family would actually come after her if that baptism was ever known. But oftentimes what's the case here is not that dramatic, but it's still very strong. It's people saying, hey, my parents, I grew up Catholic, or I grew up Lutheran, or I grew up Baptist, or I grew up Presbyterian, and it's more of a cultural thing for my family, and my family will not be pleased. I can think about people in their 50s and 60s that we've baptized right over here in this corner, and it took them months, if not years, because they felt like they were doing a disservice to their parents. And if that's you, I want you to know that your parents being important to you, that's a huge win for us. But if they are keeping you in your mind or in reality from stepping into the freedom Jesus offers, then you're still bound. You're still bound. And what I want to encourage you to do in this moment is to receive the freedom Jesus came to bring. So I'm going to pray for us. And then what's going to happen right over here on the side and really in this space back this way, we're going to have some leaders that are ready to pray with you if for the first time in your life you're ready to find freedom that only Jesus gives. Maybe your thought process today after hearing this message is something like, Jesus, I've tried religion. I tried to figure out how could I get across the line, and today I'm hearing that I don't have to. Today, I'm hearing, Jesus, that on the cross, you crossed the line for all of us. And what I have to do is open myself up and experience your freedom. Freedom from sin, freedom from the lies I believe, freedom from the addiction and the pain that I've lived with, freedom from my past. And Jesus has made a promise to offer that to each of us today. Will you receive freedom? Or do you want to keep playing the religious game? Would you pray with me? Just bow your heads and close your eyes. Todd and the team are going to come lead us in an appropriate response song that really declares what we're urging you to in this moment. And we've got men and women who are ready to receive you. They're ready to pray with you. They're ready to talk to you about what salvation that Jesus offers how it can be experienced by you. They're ready to hear what's going on in your heart and mind. Certainly they can pray with you about any other things, but do you need to be set free today? Set free from your sin. Set free from your past. We're going to pray that Jesus would do that in you and that you would just get up as we stand to sing in a moment and go ask someone, hey, what does this mean? Or tell them, I'm ready to be set free. They're ready and equipped to respond to you. So Jesus, we thank you. We thank you for this moment with this woman where everyone had to reimagine what mattered to you. Jesus, thank you that you didn't give us a heavy religion to uphold and try to figure out and try to jump through the hoops with, but you came to us when we couldn't get ourselves to you, and you made a way, and you came to free us from our sin. You came to free us from everything that would keep us from the life you created us to live, both on this earth and in the life to come with you in glory. Jesus, I pray that you would free men and women all over this room, that they would recognize that they are known and they can know you. Thank you that you did not come, Jesus, to uphold a religion as much as you came to free a people. I ask that you would bring freedom all throughout this space. In your name, amen. I want to ask you to stand. And if that's you, have the courage, have the desire to step out and just take one of these guys or girls by the hand and say, hey, I need this freedom that I've heard about today. Let's respond.